For 23 days, the alien empire believed their princess was dead. Her warship had exploded in the middle of a brutal battle. Thousands of soldiers had watched it happen. Sensors confirmed it. The wreckage was scattered across space. The empire mourned. But on the 24th day, something impossible happened. A lone human walked through the capital gates, carrying the princess in his arms. Alive. The empire in mourning. The capital world of the Aurelian Empire had never been so quiet. 4 million citizens filled the massive city, but the streets felt empty. The sky was covered with mourning banners, long silver flags hanging from towers. Every broadcast repeated the same message. Princess Ilara was gone. She was not just royalty. She was the future of the empire. Unlike most nobles, she had chosen to serve in the military. She commanded fleets, fought pirates, and defended distant colonies. The people trusted her. And now she was gone. Lost during the Battle of Varco's Ridge, one of the worst conflicts the empire had fought in decades. The official report was simple. Her flagship had been destroyed. No escape pods. No survivors. The empire believed it. Until the morning of the 24th day. A human appears. At exactly the 6th hour, the capital gate guards saw something unusual. A man. Walking. Not a soldier. Not a merchant. A human. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. They were known as explorers, traders, and sometimes unpredictable problem solvers. This one looked exhausted. Dust covered his boots. His clothes were torn. His beard had grown wild. But he kept walking. And in his arms, he carried someone. At first the guards thought it was just an injured civilian. Then the commander looked closer. His eyes widened. The face was unmistakable. Princess Ilara. The gate opens. Open the gate, the commander said immediately. No hesitation. No questions. The massive doors slid open. The human walked inside slowly, carefully carrying the princess. He moved like someone who had been walking for a very long time. But he never once loosened his grip. Medical teams rushed toward them. The human gently lowered the princess onto a medical stretcher. She needs treatment, he said calmly. His voice was tired but steady. Left side wound. Stabilized it 11 days ago. Dehydration is the second problem. The alien doctors quickly scanned her body. Their eyes widened in shock. She was alive. Barely. But alive. The human introduces himself. The gate commander stared at the stranger. You are human, he said. Yes. Your name? Elias Rook. Occupation? Elias shrugged slightly. Independent salvage pilot. The commander blinked. A salvage pilot? This man had somehow walked into the imperial capital carrying the most important person in the empire. How did you find her? The commander asked. Elias looked toward the distant stars. The battlefield, he said quietly. What really happened? 3 weeks earlier, Elias had been flying through a dangerous part of space. His job was simple. After battles ended, he searched for wreckage. Sometimes valuable technology survived. Sometimes survivors needed rescue. It was dangerous work. But humans were known for doing dangerous jobs. Then his ship detected something unusual. A distress beacon. Weak. Old. Still transmitting. Elias followed the signal. What he found shocked him. The battlefield was massive. Destroyed ships floated like broken cities. Thousands of fragments drifted silently in space. And in the middle of that graveyard, he found the signal. A damaged escape pod. Inside it was the princess. Barely alive. The enemy was still there. But rescuing her was not simple. The enemy fleet still controlled the area. Strange alien warships scanned the battlefield. They were searching for survivors. Not to rescue them. To finish them. Elias knew one thing immediately. If those ships found the princess first, the war would be over. The empire would collapse. So the human made a decision. He shut down his ship's power. He drifted silently among the wreckage. Waiting. Watching. Thinking. Humans were good at many things. But one thing aliens constantly underestimated was human creativity. The plan. Elias studied the battlefield for hours. The enemy ships scanned regularly, but they followed patterns. Predictable patterns. Aliens loved order. Humans loved breaking it. Elias quietly used debris from destroyed ships to disguise his vessel. Then he slowly pushed the escape pod toward his ship using small bursts of thrusters. No radar. No energy spikes. Nothing the enemy scanners would detect. It took 12 hours. But he did it. He pulled the princess into his ship. Alive. But badly injured. And the enemy fleet was still outside. The long escape. Leaving the battlefield was the hardest part. Elias knew the enemy ships would detect his engine if he used it normally. So he did something unusual. He didn't fly. He drifted. Using gravity from destroyed ships. Using debris as cover. Using small thrusters only when absolutely necessary. It took 2 days to escape the battlefield. But eventually, the scanners disappeared. He was free. But the princess was still dying. So the human did the only thing he could. He kept her alive. For 23 days. Until he reached the capital. A question that changes everything. Back at the Imperial Gate, the commander stared at Elias. You carried her across half the galaxy. Elias nodded. Yes. Why? The human looked at the unconscious princess. Then he gave a small tired smile. Because someone had to. But what Elias didn't know was that the enemy fleet had already discovered something terrifying. The princess was alive. And now they were coming to finish the job. The princess awakens. The medical wing of the Imperial Palace was the most advanced hospital in the Aurelian Empire. Alien doctors worked with machines that could rebuild bones, repair organs, and restore damaged cells in hours. Even so, the doctors were shocked that the princess had survived as long as she did. For 23 days she had traveled across deep space inside a small human salvage ship. The doctors studied the field treatment that had saved her life. It was simple, crude, improvised, and brilliant. The human had used metal plates from damaged ship panels to stop internal bleeding. He sealed wounds using emergency polymer glue meant for hull repairs. He created a slow hydration system using recycled coolant filters. It should not have worked. But it had. After several hours of intensive treatment, Princess Ilara finally opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was a bright medical light above her. The second thing she saw was the Emperor. Her father stood beside the bed. The most powerful ruler in the empire looked older than she remembered. Ilara, he said quietly. The princess tried to speak, but her voice was weak. What happened? The Emperor paused. You survived. She blinked slowly. How? The Emperor turned his head toward the far side of the room. A tired human man sat quietly in a chair, still wearing the same worn clothes, still looking like someone who had crossed half the galaxy without rest. He happened, the Emperor said. A soldier's memory. Ilara studied the human for a long moment. Then memories returned. Fragments of battle. Explosions. Her flagship breaking apart. The desperate launch into an escape pod. Enemy ships hunting survivors. Then darkness. But she remembered something else. A voice. Calm. Human. You're not dying today, the voice had said. The princess slowly lifted her hand. Elias. The human stood up. You remember, he said. She gave a weak smile. Hard to forget the man who refused to let me die. The human explanation. The Emperor studied Elias carefully. Humans were strange to most alien empires. They were not the strongest species. They were not the most technologically advanced. But humans had a reputation. They solved impossible problems. How did you survive the enemy blockade? The Emperor asked. Elias scratched his beard slightly. Your enemies are very organized, he said. That is not a weakness. It is if you know how to break patterns. The Emperor leaned forward. Explain. Elias walked to a holographic map of the battlefield displayed in the room. He pointed to the destroyed fleet zone. Your enemy ships scan the area every 10 minutes. That is standard. Yes, Elias said. Standard means predictable. He showed them the path he used. Instead of flying away from the battlefield, he moved deeper into the debris field. Then he used wreckage as moving shields. He bounced his ship between gravity pockets created by massive destroyed vessels. The ship barely used power. The scanners saw nothing. For 2 days he drifted through the battlefield like floating debris. The Emperor stared at the map. That maneuver should be impossible. Elias shrugged. Not impossible. Just annoying. A new problem appears. While the Emperor studied the map, an alarm suddenly echoed through the palace. Red lights flashed across the medical wing. A military officer rushed into the room. Your Majesty, the officer said urgently. Enemy ships have entered the outer system. Everyone in the room froze. How many? The Emperor asked. 27 warships. The princess slowly pushed herself upright. That's impossible, she said weakly. The enemy fleet was destroyed. The officer shook his head. This is a different fleet. The Emperor looked toward the human. Elias frowned slightly. They found out she survived, he said. The officer nodded. Yes. And they came to fix the mistake. The Empire's fear. The palace war room activated immediately. Commanders gathered around a massive star map. The enemy fleet moved quickly toward the capital world. The Empire's defenses were strong. But the main fleet was still repairing after the previous battle. The capital was vulnerable. The Emperor looked at his commanders. How long until they arrive? 4 hours. Silence filled the room. 4 hours was not enough time to recall distant fleets. The enemy ships were fast assault cruisers, built for sudden attacks. The Emperor slowly turned toward Elias. You escaped their fleet once. Elias nodded. Yes. Can you stop them? The human looked at the map quietly. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he smiled slightly. Maybe. The human idea. Elias stepped closer to the holographic display. Your enemies expect a traditional defense. Correct. They expect fleets, shields, and battle formations. That is how wars are fought. Elias shook his head. That's how alien wars are fought. He zoomed in on the capital's asteroid defense ring. Thousands of small asteroids orbited the planet. Normally they were used for mining operations. But Elias saw something else. Opportunity. How fast can you move those asteroids? He asked. The engineers looked confused. They are not weapons. They can be. The Emperor crossed his arms. Explain. Elias pointed to the enemy fleet's predicted path. They will approach in tight formation for maximum firepower. Yes. That means they are not expecting chaos. The human smiled. So we give them chaos. The human strategy. Elias' plan was simple. Ridiculously simple. Instead of meeting the enemy fleet in a normal battle, the Empire would turn the asteroid belt into a giant moving trap. Thousands of mining thrusters would push asteroids into the fleet's flight path. Not fast enough to destroy ships immediately, but fast enough to break formation. Alien fleets relied on perfect coordination. Without formation, their weapon systems became less effective. Their shields overlapped incorrectly. Their ships became vulnerable. The Emperor stared at the plan. You want to throw rocks at a war fleet? Elias nodded. Yes. One commander laughed. That is primitive. Elias looked at him calmly. So is gravity. A princess believes. The room remained silent. Most of the alien commanders looked doubtful. But Princess Ilara slowly stood from her chair. Her voice was still weak, but firm. This human crossed a battlefield filled with enemy ships. He kept me alive for 23 days. And he walked through our gates carrying the future of this empire. She looked directly at the Emperor. I trust him. The Emperor studied Elias one more time. Then he made his decision. Prepare the asteroid defense system. The commanders gasped. Your Majesty. The Emperor raised his hand. Do it. He turned toward Elias. If this works, human, you will have saved the Empire twice. Elias gave a tired smile. Let's try not to make it 3. The enemy arrives. 4 hours later the enemy fleet entered the capital system. 27 warships. Perfect formation. Weapons ready. They expected an easy victory. They expected a frightened empire. They did not expect thousands of asteroids suddenly moving directly toward them. And they definitely did not expect a human standing in the command center, smiling. Because the real trap had only just begun. The calm before chaos. The enemy fleet entered the Aurelian capital system with complete confidence. 27 warships moved in perfect formation, like a single massive weapon drifting through the darkness of space. Their engines burned with cold blue light, and their scanners swept across the system with mechanical precision. They expected resistance. They expected fleets. They expected the traditional patterns of alien warfare. What they did not expect was silence. Inside the Imperial Command Center, everyone watched the holographic map. Thousands of asteroids floated between the enemy fleet and the capital planet. At first the enemy commanders ignored them. Asteroids were harmless. Natural debris. Nothing to fear. Then the asteroids started moving. The first disruption. Mining thrusters hidden across the asteroid belt ignited. One by one. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Massive rocks slowly changed direction. At first the movement looked random. But Elias knew exactly what he was doing. Every asteroid moved along carefully calculated paths. Small ones accelerated faster. Large ones drifted slowly. Together they created a chaotic storm of rock and debris moving directly toward the enemy fleet. The first enemy commander reacted instantly. Adjust formation, the alien ordered. But the storm kept growing. Thousands of objects. Different speeds. Different sizes. Different angles. Their sensors struggled to track them all. Formation began to stretch. Ships moved slightly out of position. Only a few meters. But in space warfare, a few meters could change everything. Elias watched quietly. Now they're uncomfortable, he said. The pattern breaks. The enemy fleet attempted to maintain formation. But the asteroid storm kept expanding. Several warships were forced to fire their weapons to destroy incoming rocks. That created energy spikes. Those spikes triggered their own defense systems. Now their ships were reacting to each other. Overlapping shields. Conflicting targeting systems. The once perfect formation began to break apart. Inside the command center, the alien officers stared in disbelief. This should not be working, one commander whispered. Elias shrugged. They built their tactics around control. He pointed at the holographic battlefield. Humans fight differently. The second layer of the trap. The enemy fleet struggled through the asteroid storm, but they were still powerful warships. They began destroying large asteroids with heavy weapons. Slowly pushing forward. The alien commanders in the capital began to worry. They will break through, one officer said. Elias nodded calmly. Yes. Everyone looked at him. That was always the plan. The Emperor frowned. You expected this? Of course, Elias said. Phase 1 was just to make them angry. Human creativity. Elias activated another command. The holographic map zoomed out. Far beyond the asteroid field. Hundreds of small objects suddenly appeared. Escape pods. Cargo drones. Mining containers. all drifting silently in space. The Emperor looked confused. What are those? Elias smiled. Distractions. Hidden inside each drifting object was a tiny engine and a simple transmitter. Suddenly, all of them activated. Hundreds of signals exploded across the enemy scanners. To the alien fleet, it looked like hundreds of small attack ships suddenly appearing around them. Their targeting systems went into emergency defense mode. Turrets rotated wildly. Missiles launched. Energy weapons fired in every direction. The fleet began shooting at ghosts. Panic in the fleet. Inside the enemy ships, confusion spread rapidly. Their scanners were overwhelmed. Hundreds of targets. Signals everywhere. Asteroids colliding with shields. Their formations completely destroyed. Several ships accidentally fired through the defensive barriers of nearby vessels. Shield systems began to overload. Communication channels flooded with emergency reports. The once disciplined fleet was now fighting shadows. Elias crossed his arms. Aliens trust their machines too much, he said. Humans know machines can be fooled. The final move. But Elias still had one final surprise. The Emperor watched the human carefully. You are not finished. Elias shook his head. Not even close. He activated the last part of his plan. Hidden behind several large asteroids were 20 old mining platforms, normally used for breaking apart large rocks. Each one had massive drilling lasers. But Elias had modified their targeting systems. Now they were weapons. The platforms fired simultaneously. 20 powerful beams cut through space. Not at the enemy ships themselves, but at the massive asteroids surrounding them. The asteroids shattered. Thousands of fragments exploded outward at incredible speed. The enemy fleet was suddenly trapped inside a deadly cloud of debris. Even their strongest shields struggled to survive the impact. Several ships lost engines. Others lost weapon systems. One cruiser spun out of control after a massive rock punched through its hull. The battlefield became chaos. Exactly what Elias wanted. The human victory. Within minutes, the enemy fleet collapsed. Some ships attempted to escape. Others were disabled. Several surrendered. The Empire's defense forces moved in quickly. The battle was over. 27 warships defeated. Without a single Imperial fleet engagement. Inside the command center, silence filled the room. Alien commanders stared at the battlefield. The Emperor slowly turned toward Elias. You defeated an invasion fleet. With rocks. Elias smiled. Well. And a few other things. The princess understands. Princess Ilara watched the human quietly. Then she laughed softly. Now she finally understood. The galaxy had always underestimated humans. They were not the strongest species. They were not the most advanced. But they had something rare. Imagination. The ability to see possibilities where others saw limitations. She looked at Elias. You saved my life. You saved my empire. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. I mostly just hate bullies. A message to the galaxy. News of the battle spread quickly. Across dozens of star systems. Empires studied the recordings. They watched as a single human strategist dismantled an entire fleet using creativity and simple tools. It became a warning. A lesson repeated across the galaxy. Never underestimate humans. Because when things look impossible, humans start getting creative. And when humans get creative, even the strongest empires can fall.